are off the charts for both Doncic and LeBron James.
Growing up, I used to watch him a lot. I admire him today, too.
Blocked by Doncic once, twice on his hero, LeBron.
James isolating against Doncic. You bet! LeBron James is delivering.
Well, you wonder if it's starting to get in his head at all.
He ripped his jersey.
LeBron James with his 9,000th career assist.
Deep three. Hit it! Right in LeBron's face!
You know, I think he's a great young talent.
He's getting better. All right, keep going.
Dallas definitely has a great one.
Well, LeBron James has played on Christmas Day 13 times in a row entering this season. In all but 3 of those seasons, he was either the preseason MVP favorite or the co-favorite. Friday will be his first Christmas Day matchup against the early frontrunner for MVP. That would be Luka Doncic, who grew up idolizing LeBron James, but is ready for the challenge of taking the mantle from the king. Rachel Nichols sat down with Doncic as he prepared for his Christmas debut.
God rest ye merry, gentle Mary, rest ye merry.
Gorgeous move from Luka Doncic.
Luka Magic has made everybody ooh and ah!
Doncic pulls up, three-pointer. Bang! Bang! Doncic wins the game.
The legend of Luka continuing to be written.
Luka, this is your first Christmas Day game in the NBA. What are you looking forward to about it?
Very excited. This is my first one, and we played the champions. That's why I'm excited too. So it's gonna be fun day, fun game, and a lot of people is gonna be watching. So I hope that it's gonna be a great game.
Luka Doncic is going to win the MVP.
He will be the undisputed best player on that team.
You and I have talked about the fact that you want to win MVP. It's one of your goals. Las Vegas odds makers have said you are actually the favorite to win MVP this year. Do you think that you can do it?
I think I can do it, but that's not my first goal, far from it. But it's great to see that. My goal is always to win a championship. That's, I think, not just mine, the whole organization goal. And hopefully some days we can achieve it.
Can't wait for this. You can see Luka against LeBron, all part of our NBA Christmas Spectacular. It all gets started at noon Eastern on ESPN. Pelicans Heat, then over on ABC, Warriors and Bucks, followed by Nets Celtics, and Mavs Lakers. That's on ABC and ESPN. We cap the day with the Clippers and Nuggets at 10:30 Eastern, 7:30 Pacific. All 5 amazing.
Paul George scored 33, so what? Opening night, so what? I need to see Paul George score 33 closing night, not opening night. And that's the whole question about this team. Now, do I like what they've added to the team? Do I like Ibaka? Oh, yeah. And we both agreed that Ibaka was an upgrade on Montrezl Harrell, who's a nice player. But Ibaka can also shoot it and can defend. And he's a veteran with championship experience, all that. That's a really nice pickup. They did not get Rondo. They did not get the point guard who can organize that offense. Batum, if a dude like that is interested, right, because he got his money and he went to a place where they weren't going to be competitive and we all forgot about him, and frankly, he didn't play very well. But if he's going to be interested and still has some gas in the tank, that's an interesting pickup. Is that enough to make me think that the Clippers are going to be the biggest threat to the Lakers? When, for example, I saw last year the Clippers got by the Mavericks because and only because Porzingis was unfairly fouled out of a game. The refs threw him out of a game he should not have been thrown out of, and then he got hurt. If Porzingis is healthy, Mavericks are better than the Clippers last year. I watched it, and I picked the Clippers. And I said after that series, Mavericks are a better team than them. Maybe the Nuggets are too, right? Like a team the Clippers actually lost to. Let's see what happens with Porter Jr. I can't say based on day one, when you're not in the playoffs and Paul George shows up, I want to see playoff PG-13 become a compliment, not an insult. Then I'll buy the Clippers.
Well, first of all, I can say that the Clippers are the biggest threat to the Lakers because last night had nothing to do with that. I felt that way coming into the season. And here is the reason why. I don't think we'll ever see Kawhi Leonard and Paul George more motivated with the acquisition of Serge Ibaka and Ty Lue coaching them and having the cachet to hold them accountable, even more so than Doc Rivers. Remember, when Doc Rivers inherited them, he was in his 6th year in Los Angeles. There was questions as to what his future was going to be as the Los Angeles Clippers coach, because sometimes when you're there and you're in a particular place long enough, sometimes they feel they just need a new voice, and you had people close to Ballmer that didn't necessarily want Doc Rivers to be retained. So as a result of that, he walked in the last season with all of that going on. Then you combine that with the bubble and the bubble play, because the NBA season was halted. The reality of the situation is that Ty Lue is in a better situation than Doc Rivers was to coach this team. Now, you're Kawhi Leonard. Unlike your first championship in San Antonio, unlike your second championship in Toronto, you are the face of this franchise, meaning these Los Angeles Clippers. They mortgaged the farm in order to get you by giving you what you wanted in terms of acquiring Paul George. So as a result, it's not just Kawhi's responsibility. Paul George, to a degree, is also Kawhi Leonard's responsibility, because you asked for all of this stuff. Well, they gave you all the pieces that you needed. What you gonna do about it? You're the one that had the commercial. You're the one that had the crown dangling from the mirror in your car. You're the one that put everybody on notice with your New Balance commercials that you had arrived, and it was a new day as a result that had arrived in Tinseltown, and then you came up short in the Game 7. Now, we can look at Paul George hitting the side of the backboard, which we all brought up, and we can't erase that. But he did drop 33 in Game 6. He did drop 26 in Game 5. It wasn't like he was a flat-out scrub, for crying out loud. He had a bad night in the Game 7, which is not excusable. But it was even worse for Kawhi Leonard, because so much more was expected from him, and he was an absolute no-show. MIA, missing in action, couldn't be found, while Jamal Murray was giving him 40. So what I'm saying to you is that with all of that stuff going on, and now LeBron James being a championship in the same building, in the same city, in the same town, with you still having those damn commercials, I think they're highly motivated. And as a result, we're going to see the Clippers come at the Lakers. I think that that's their problem, Max. They wasn't even interested in playing anybody else but the Lakers. The Clippers get up for the Lakers unlike they get up for any other team in the NBA. If you're talking about what could happen to them beforehand, fine. But if you're talking about a matchup face-to-face, you against me, the Los Angeles Clippers are the most significant threat to the Los Angeles Lakers, because that's the one team they get up for every night.
Well, I don't know that. I don't even know that that's true, that I would say that they present, like in a matchup, the biggest challenge for the Lakers. I'm very interested, for example, in our game tonight, the Suns and the Mavs, right? I know no Porzingis, but like teams like that, let's see what happens with those guys. Like, as you know, I like the Mavs as my sleeper, but you got to even watch a team like Phoenix. Phoenix is loaded. So I don't know that they match up, the Clippers match up best with the Lakers simply because of motivation. I like the Kennard pickup. Like Shamet for Kennard is kind of like the Seth Curry for Richardson trade, right? Like you're giving up maybe better shooting, although both, you know, obviously Kennard can also shoot. You're giving up better shooting for maybe a better player, a guy who's going to get more minutes. Like the Clippers did improve in the offseason, but I don't know to say enough to be better or more dangerous to the Lakers than, say, the Mavericks. When you think of the Mavs, if Porzingis stays healthy, when they're fully loaded, just think of Stephen A., the size and the shooting, where your point guard, basically, point forward, whatever, the guy bringing the ball up in Luka is 6'8". When your two guard, Tim Hardaway Jr., is what, 6'6", 6'7"? When you got guys like Dorian Finney-Smith who can defend and bomb from three. At least last year he was bombing from three at 6'7", 6'8", whatever he is. Maxi Kleber, same thing, can defend and shoot from the outside, 6'10", and then Porzingis at 7'3", who can do all those things too. That might be a tougher matchup for the Lakers than the guys you mentioned, or if Portis Jr. takes the next step. He's awful defensively. But if he even gets a little bit better there, but certainly he should be ascending offensively. I mean, the Clippers couldn't handle those guys. And by the way, the Lakers could, but that was still a team in its embryonic stages developing. What's going to happen this year if they actually come out as a more mature, better team with a legit third option? I don't know the Clippers are the toughest matchup for the Lakers just because they're motivated. I need to see Paul George perform under pressure, period.
Well, if that's the case, do you have enough to beat the Lakers? I'm not sure about that, but if you had Harden, there would be no doubt that the Brooklyn Nets would be the favorites. And by the way, James Harden is 32 years of age, or approaching 32 years of age. It ain't like he's 40. He's still got at least another 5 years in him. That's where I'm coming from with that. Yeah, you still consider trading for James Harden.
First of all, I heard you talk about whoops or oops. It's whoops, by the way, with a W. Like, whoops, there it is. Kevin Durant's back. Kevin Durant last night looked like he looked like KD. Maybe not quite as strong or as explosive, but it's hard to tell in one game. But he was already 80% of the way there. Let's assume he comes along even more. Here's the thing, Stephen A. The Nets should absolutely not trade for James Harden. I saw what I needed to see last night in terms of the way that team functions. You don't want a ball stopper who, by the way, has had chemistry issues with other stars in the past, even when they get along well off the court, right? Like, forget about him and Chris Paul, him and Westbrook. It lasts a year, and then he doesn't want to do it anymore. So that's one issue. But the more important issue for me is I think he'd make the Nets worse. I mean, Harden is a great player. There's no two ways about it.
What?
But the way they look, KD, he'd make them worse. KD and Kyrie are working extremely well together. These are two guys who can do a lot of things, including really shoot the ball, right? So it's not like the freak or someone even like LeBron who can hit shots from certain spots but is not really a pure shooter, where then you think, oh, we have to surround them with shooters. No, you don't. Not really. They're the shooters. Right, so a guy like Dinwiddie can get minutes even if he can't really bomb from the outside. But Joe Harris can bomb from the outside. Karis LeVert can. Right, you look around at the supporting cast of this team. Jarrett Allen is a really good player. Not a shooter, but a really good player. But that's the point. You can play multiple guys who don't shoot from the outside with KD and Kyrie and who do other things. Look at how well the team is moving the ball, playing unselfishly. Shooting from the outside, doing everything you want them to do. And look at the depth. Kenny Anderson pointed this out last night on the broadcast at halftime. Look at the depth of the team. I might disagree that Jeff Green would start on a lot of teams, but there are very few teams Karis LeVert would not only not start on, but be featured on, right? LeVert, Dinwiddie, I just mentioned them. Harris, Allen, they have depth on the team that is going to allow them, not only allow Kyrie and KD to do their things, because they'll move the ball and play unselfishly, but depth on the team that will allow them to get out of the East. I would not sacrifice all that for a dude who's going to come in, stop the ball, and maybe create chemistry issues. Don't trade for Harden if you're the Nets.
Well, see, this is where I have a problem with you talking about basketball. This is where I have to go to the basketball authorities and have you arrested. This is what needs to happen when it comes to you, Max Kellerman. The Brooklyn Nets would be worse with James Harden. I understand the notion, okay, look at this team. Look at the depth that they have. Let's see how it works out. Don't touch it. I understand that thinking. Spencer Dinwiddie is no scrub. Karis LeVert is no scrub. Those brothers can ball. I got mad respect for them. I'm really good. I'm really high on DeAndre Jordan, despite the fact that he's older right now. Joe Harris, I'm very, very fond of. I can't say enough about Sean Marks and the job that he has done with this franchise, especially. I love the fact that he picked up Jeff Green. I love Jeff Green on this squad because he's not just a good player, he's also a character guy. One of the best people in the world that you could possibly meet. I love Jeff Green. But let me tell you something right now, Max. To sit up there and say that a guy that just finished averaging over 30 the last 3 years, that has been in the conversation as one of the most prolific offensive weapons the game of basketball in its history has ever seen, would make a championship contender worse. I don't understand that kind of thinking. That's blasphemy as far as I'm concerned. Keep in mind, Max, come playoff time. I've had to educate you about this before. I don't know how many times. Remember, you picked Milwaukee to beat Miami last year. I had to school you on that one. Remember, when it comes to playoff basketball and the game slows, and I'll hand this to you, Max. I'll hand this to you because I definitely want to get your response to this. When the game slows down, come playoff time, the game slows down, and as a result, you find yourself with coaches and teams being incredibly familiar with what you want to do. Max, it ain't about plays, and it ain't about schemes. It's about three things: talent, conditioning, and at the end of the day, That dude that you can give the ball to and say, excuse me, I need you to take me to the promised land. KD, what makes him so sensational is the fact that he could go without touching the ball for 10 straight possessions. And then you could give him the ball to stop the bleeding in 2. And he'll just put it in the hole anytime you want to. You got to pay attention to that. James Harden does not make anybody worse. That's going overboard.
Well, yeah, you need players who can go get their own shot when it slows down, right? And when they wall up, when they pay extra defensive attention, when it requires the high basketball IQ. No doubt about it. They have 2 guys who can do that just about as well as anyone who ever lived, right? You have KD and Kyrie. You don't need another guy to do that on that level. You need other guys who can do that, and you can't tell me LeVert can't get his own shot. We saw LeVert get his own shot, right? We just saw that last year when he was able to develop as the primary scorer on that team. But we also saw last night he doesn't have to be. He can come off the bench. I think he can play next to those guys. He can get his shot off the dribble. He can shoot from the outside. He can score on all 3 levels. LeVert is the perfect third best
can they get to the
on
finals?
a team like that. You don't need more than that. And by the way, LeVert doesn't need to. When he's at his best, he's not dribbling it 1,000 times like Harden. He sometimes has a tendency to do that. Not on this team, he won't be able to do that, right? So you have guys like...
For clarity.
I understand if it was Jeff Green and DeAndre Jordan, guys like that are available all the time in the offseason, and they're useful in certain situations. No doubt, I agree. But you know who you can't just pick up at any point, who gives you a little premium over just an NBA starter? A guy like Dinwiddie, a guy like LeVert. At the position, a guy like Allen.
Okay.
The Nets have those guys, and they're perfect around these stars, Stephen A.
The Rockets in the NBA are now reviewing video of James Harden partying maskless at a strip club to determine if he violated the league's COVID-19 protocols, putting the All-Stars availability for tonight's season opener in question, sources telling our Tim McMahon. Now, that video was published by Black Sports Online. It purportedly was from a Houston strip club's Christmas party that was held this week. And this is all, guys, coming off of yesterday's report where, according to The Athletic, Harden had multiple verbal confrontations with teammates at practice, also threw a ball at Jae'Sean Tate. So, Max, I want to start with you here. Are all of these off-the-court actions by Harden going to affect his trade value?
No, I don't really think so, because I think everyone knows what he's doing. Unless teams are looking, going, well, if he's not happy here, he'll pull the same thing. But, if a superstar wants to leave and he's not being accommodated, this is their leverage. So it's pretty clear Harden's acting out in order to get an effect. Stephen A., whether or not how much that affects his trade value, I'll leave to you. I'll tell you what I think has absolutely affected his trade value. I mentioned off the top of the show, if I were the Nets, I would not trade for Harden. Not because he's not a great player, but because their depth really showed itself yet last night, the way they shared the ball, the whole thing. I'll tell you who else I wouldn't trade if I were another team. I wouldn't trade Ben Simmons for James Harden. Not after last night, Stephen A., because if you watch the Brooklyn Nets, there's one guy on the Sixers that you're like, okay, there's no defending Kevin Durant, but the guy who can do the best possible job is Ben Simmons, who I thought, when active, was the best defender in the world last year. If I'm the Sixers and I'm watching KD last night, and I'm going, he's already at least 80% KD, we're going to need Ben Simmons on that cat, right? And I'm not trading Embiid, so what does that leave you with? Spare parts? So I think right now, after last night and the way KD looked, especially in the way the Nets looked, if I were the Nets, I wouldn't trade for him. If I were the Sixers, I wouldn't give up Simmons for him. If his trade value is going down, I think it's based on that stuff, on-court considerations after last night, more than it is on his misbehavior off the court in order to force a trade.
Well, first of all, let me say a couple of things. Number one, if you talk to the Houston Rockets, they will tell you they're not getting the quality offers for James Harden that one would anticipate from a league-leading scorer over the last 3 years who averaged over 30. They expected better offers. They're not getting those quality offers from him. That's why he's still in a Houston Rockets uniform, just to make sure that from a reportorial perspective, I point that out. The other thing that I would say is this. when you talk about Ben Simmons in the fashion that you do, Max, it comes down to this. If you're the Philadelphia 76ers, is it a long-term view where it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, and you're thinking about 3, 4, and 5 years down the road? Or are you talking about the Brooklyn Nets and what they are and what they're trying to be and how you're going to compete with them? Because I got news for you. Ben Simmons not having any kind of perimeter game whatsoever is not going to get it done for the Philadelphia 76ers when all is said and done. I don't give a damn how well he plays defense. There's no one on the planet Earth that can stop Kevin Durant, not even Ben Simmons. It ain't happening. Kevin Durant is flowing and he's healthy. You're not stopping him. He's still giving you 27 to 30 a night. You can book that. And so because of it, the way to offset it is to have such prolific firepower offensively that you pressurize an opposing offense by highlighting for them the inability or just being cautious enough not to make mistakes because you will pay a price. It's not that James Harden's going to give you the defense that Ben Simmons is going to give you. It's that his offense is so prolific, it puts more pressure on an opposing offense to be productive because you know this brother is coming. Now, to get to the point about off-court issues impacting Harden's trade value, we completely agree on that. We're totally on the same page. It has no effect, and here's why. Everyone knows what James Harden is doing. James Harden is a professional. Yeah, the lateness. Yeah, being, preferential treatment. We get all of that. But this brother plays hurt. He doesn't miss games. He doesn't engage in load management. He shows up and balls every single night. In that regard, he is a high-level professional. For him to act this way, it is clearly and flagrantly on purpose. He is doing this to bring attention to everyone and their mother. He does not want to be a Houston Rocket any longer. He wants out. And I don't want to call him the modern day T.O. or whatever when T.O. was trying to get out of his contract in Philadelphia, because that's what those push-ups were about in his driveway when Andy Reid sent him home and all of that other stuff. T.O. wanted a new contract. He wanted out of Philadelphia because Philadelphia made it clear they were not going to give it to him. And as a result, he was advised by Drew Rosenhaus essentially to act up to some degree to force his way out of Philadelphia. In this case, that's what James Harden is doing. He's trying to force his way out of Houston. He does not want to be a Houston Rocket. He wants out by any means necessary, and he is creating a headache because he knows that's the only way with 2 years left on his contract that he could possibly get his way. He's not that guy. He's not stupid by any stretch of the imagination. He's doing it on purpose because he wants out. Other teams know that. And if he fills their needs without them having to mortgage the farm to get him, they're not.